April 7th, 2024. Kreminna Forest Belt, eastern Ukraine, 4:17 in the morning. The pine trees are black against grey fog. Temperature, -4 Celsius. Visibility, less than 80 meters at ground level. The forest smells of frost and diesel exhaust. A thermal silhouette moves through the murk, 60 tons of steel and rocket fuel rolling slow on a sand track between the trees. Its tracks compress frost into the ground with a sound that carries further than its crew wants it to. This is the TOS-1A Solntsepyok, sunshine in Russian. Nothing in the Russian close support arsenal matches it. A single salvo from its 24-tube thermobaric rocket pod can erase 300 meters of defensive trench in under 4 seconds. Fuel-air warheads detonate at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, igniting the oxygen inside any enclosed space. Lungs collapse. Eardrums fail. Anything sheltered that would survive fragmentation does not survive the pressure wave. Concrete bunkers, log-reinforced fighting positions, underground command posts. The thermobaric effect reaches through apertures and down into the earth itself. In 7 days of firing from concealed positions inside the Kreminna forest belt, this single launcher had killed an estimated 73 Ukrainian infantry. An entire assault company. Gone. In a bunker 14 kilometers to the east, 2 operators are watching it move. Their monitors show thermal imagery from an ISR drone circling at 1,400 meters altitude, high enough to avoid acoustic detection, low enough to resolve individual heat signatures on the ground. The operators have watched this machine for 11 days. They know its patterns, the timing between reloads, the crew's habits, which position it prefers at dawn. Tonight, it is rolling into position 3, and tonight, there is a plan. The TOS-1A Solntsepyok entered Russian service in 1987. It was designed for a single specific mission: clearing fortified urban positions and trench networks that conventional artillery couldn't reach with the necessary precision and destructive radius. During the Soviet-Afghan War, the precursor system, the TOS-1, was used to flush Mujahideen fighters from cave complexes in Kunar province. During the First and Second Chechen Wars, it reduced entire city blocks in Grozny to gravel in single-fire missions. In Syria, it was used against rebel-held apartment complexes in Aleppo and Deir ez-Zor. Every deployment left the same signature: rapid, total, irreversible destruction of anything within the burst radius. Against dug-in infantry in a forest belt, it is close to an absolute weapon. It is also enormous, slow, and impossible to hide from thermal optics during active operations. It needs a flat firing position with minimal overhead clearance, a 10 to 15-minute reload window, and a protected approach route. The logistics tail for a TOS-1A in the field is significant. Thermobaric rockets are sensitive and heavy, requiring a dedicated resupply vehicle. The crew requires armored protection during reload. All of this means the weapon operates on a predictable cycle. It fires, it moves, it reloads, it returns. And predictable is dangerous when someone with patience is watching. Ukraine's 92nd Separate Assault Brigade had been fighting in the Kreminna sector since the autumn of 2023. The Kreminna direction was one of the most contested stretches of the Eastern Front, a densely forested zone where Russia maintained significant defensive depth, and Ukraine had been pressing to push the line back toward the Luhansk administrative border. The forest provided both sides with concealment, but worked in Russia's favor for heavy system deployment. The tree cover was thick enough to hide a TOS-1A from satellite and aerial observation during repositioning. The Brigade's Achilles UAV Battalion, formerly Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Battalion, 92nd Brigade, had been operational since late 2022. By April 2024, it was one of the most experienced dedicated FPV strike units in the Ukrainian ground forces. It wasn't the largest or most publicized, but its operators had 2 years of accumulated technique behind them, built mission by mission, failure by failure. When the TOS-1A appeared in the forest sector on March 27th, first identified by an anomalous thermal bloom during a fire mission that registered differently from artillery on the signature analysis database, the battalion's intelligence section began ISR coverage immediately. The decision not to strike immediately was deliberate. A single strike attempt against a mobile target with undefined movement patterns was likely to fail. The launcher would be somewhere else, or the strike would be jammed, or the approach vector would be wrong. They had seen all 3 failures before. The plan was to understand the target first. The ISR drone used was an Autel Evo 2 Pro V3, a commercial civilian platform modified with a thermal imaging payload and extended battery configuration, capable of 40 to 45 minutes of airtime at 1,400 meters altitude. Not a military system. Available at any serious electronics retailer. Modified by Ukrainian volunteers over the course of a weekend using parts sourced through a Telegram procurement channel run by a charity organization in Kyiv. Operators ran coverage in rotating shifts. 2-person teams, 8 hours on, 16 off. The drone flew during the TOS-1A's known activity periods, just before dawn and the window around dusk, and occasionally during deep night when a warm engine block would show clearly against a cold forest floor. For 11 days, they watched. The TOS-1A operated between 3 concealed firing positions. Position 1, approximately 2 kilometers inside the northern tree line, adjacent to the ruins of a farm collective that had been destroyed in the autumn fighting of 2022. The approach required the launcher to travel through a narrow corridor between tree lines, which meant the FPV attack vector from the east would require threading a gap barely 30 meters wide at extended range. Position 2, a logging road culvert, 400 meters south of Position 1. Lower profile, partially covered by a terrain depression, better concealment, but the approach angles from any eastern vector were blocked by a natural ridge that would break FPV line of sight on the final approach. Position 3, a sand berm reinforced with felled pine logs, directly adjacent to the L20 Forest Access Road at grid reference UT4471. Open sky to the east, a wider thermal exposure window, and, critically, a clear eastern approach vector with no terrain obstacles for the final 2 kilometers. On March 29th, March 31st, April 2nd, April 4th, and April 6th, the TOS-1A used position 3, 5 times in 11 days, always at or just before dawn, always for the same operational purpose, a fire mission against Ukrainian positions in the tree line to the southeast, followed by rapid withdrawal before Ukrainian artillery could range in. On April 4th, 3 days before the successful strike, the Achilles team had a window. 2 drones were fueled and armed. Both operators were at their controllers. The ISR feed confirmed the Solntsepyok at position 2. Not ideal, but the attack geometry was marginal, not impossible. The relay tower was transmitting. The window was open. Then the launcher moved. Not because it detected anything, not because of any intelligence compromise. A Russian crew commander for reasons that will never be known to the Achilles Battalion, adjusted his rotation schedule by 40 minutes. He drove the TOS-1A back into deep tree cover, while his crew completed a maintenance check that should have taken 20 minutes but ran long. The team stood down. Drones landed. The observation cycle reset. This is the part of drone warfare that doesn't make the highlight videos. There was a deeper problem, one that the lead operator, call sign Atlas, had been working on for 6 days before the April 7th strike. 14 kilometers was at the absolute edge of FPV operational range in the Kreminna sector. Most modified FPV quadcopters in Ukrainian service carried 8 to 12 minutes of flight time at operational speeds. At the engagement distances involved, pilots depended on relay antennas, elevated RF repeaters that extended their video and control signals beyond direct line of sight. But relay towers emit radio frequency signatures, and Russian ELINT, electronic intelligence, units positioned in the Kreminna sector had been doing exactly what the Achilles team was doing on the other side of the line: watching, listening, logging, building a technical profile. 2 previous FPV strikes in the eastern Kreminna area in late March had been jammed mid-flight. Russian ground-based electronic warfare systems, believed to be Borisogledsk 2 and Zhetel configurations, had detected the relay transmission signatures, locked the frequency bands, and severed the control links. Both strikes failed. One drone crashed into a tree line after losing guidance. One impacted a road embankment 60 meters short of its intended target. The pattern was clear to Atlas. Every time a relay tower activated before a strike, the strike got jammed. The Russians had catalogued the frequency ranges used by Achilles Battalion. They were monitoring for pre-launch transmission signatures. Detect the relay tower going hot, kill the FPV control link, neutralize the strike before the drone reached the target. Atlas spent 48 hours working through the problem with his unit's electronic warfare advisor, a former signals engineer from Kharkiv who had volunteered in October 2022. The solution they arrived at was not electronic, it was behavioral. At 4:09 a.m. on April 7th, Atlas cut power to the relay tower. Complete RF blackout. 60 seconds of silence. On the Russian ELINT systems monitoring the sector, the frequency band went quiet. Normal. A power fluctuation in combat conditions. These happened constantly, from generator faults to shrapnel damage to simple cold weather electrical failures. No pattern, no signature, no threat indicator. At 4:10 a.m., the tower came back online. Atlas had his observation window. The ISR feed confirmed the Solntsepyok still in position 3. The reload cycle was active. The crew was partially outside the hull, near the rocket pod. 12 minutes, maybe 15, before the launcher would move. I went through the 92nd Brigade's after-action documentation from this period carefully, and one detail from those records kept pulling me back. The decision to use 4 drones, 2 decoys, 2 attack birds, wasn't Atlas's alone. It had been debated by the battalion's strike planning team for 3 days before the operation. 2 senior operators argued that 4 drones was excessive. Standard doctrine was 2. Launching 4 simultaneously increased the composite RF signature and doubled the operator workload during the most critical phase of the mission. Atlas had one counter-argument. The TOS-1A Solntsepyok had an estimated Russian military acquisition cost of $8.1 million. It had killed 73 Ukrainian infantry in 7 days. They were not going to execute a 2-drone strike and miss, not if a 4-drone configuration gave them better odds. He got his 4 drones. The strike configuration Atlas designed was unconventional against any doctrine written before 2022. Standard Ukrainian FPV attack protocol. By spring 2024, typically paired one attack drone with one follow camera. The second drone arriving seconds behind the first to capture post-strike assessment footage and, if necessary, deliver a second hit. Simple, proven, effective against stationary targets with clean approach paths. Atlas designed something different. A stack. 2 drones designated decoys would fly high, 180 meters altitude, on a western approach vector, running deliberately on the frequency ranges that Russian EW units had previously jammed. If Russian electronic warfare systems were active and monitoring, the decoys would trigger the jamming envelope first. Meanwhile, 2 attack drones would fly low, under 20 meters, on an eastern approach, through the pine canopy itself, below the effective jamming floor, using the physical mass of the forest as signal attenuation and the terrain as a jamming mask. The concept had been theorized in Ukrainian drone warfare circles since early 2024. It appeared in at least one informal technical document circulated through the UAV community's Telegram channels. But against an active ELINT-equipped adversary with documented jamming capability in real combat conditions at 14-kilometer range. This was its first live test in the Kreminna sector. Atlas launched at 4:18 a.m. 4 drones airborne simultaneously. The 2 decoys climbed toward the western sky, their thermal signatures visible on the ISR feed as small, fast-moving points rising through the fog bank. The 2 attack drones dropped into the canopy line on the eastern edge of the launch site and disappeared from the ISR camera. Their onboard cameras showed darkness and pine branches. The operators were navigating on partial thermal overlay, GPS waypoints that had taken 3 nights to program, and memory of the terrain they had studied on satellite imagery for 11 days. For the first 90 seconds, nothing jammed. Then, at 4:18:47, the ISR drone registered a new thermal bloom to the southwest. A Russian EW vehicle had activated its jamming transmitter. The signature matched a Borisogledsk 2 system, responding to the decoy signatures on the western approach. The jamming hit the targeted frequency bands at full power. The 2 decoys lost their control signal and crashed into the forest on the western approach, spent as designed. The attack drones, running low under the eastern canopy on a different frequency allocation, registered 0 signal disruption. At 4:19:26 a.m., both attack drones cleared the canopy edge and emerged into open air above the sand berm at position 3. The TOS-1A was in the frame, 200 meters, closing at 120 kilometers per hour. Its 24-tube rocket pod was partially elevated. Crew members were visible near the left side of the hull. The launcher was loaded, stationary, and exposed. Strike 1 aligned on the gap between the rocket tubes at under 150 meters. At 4:19:41 a.m., it hit. The warhead, a repurposed PG-7VM anti-tank-shaped charge, rated at 100 mm RHA penetration, punched through the outer casing of the thermobaric rocket pod between launch tubes 14 and 22. The detonation was immediate. Tube 14's thermobaric warhead initiated, then 15. The sympathetic detonation propagated laterally across the pod in under 2 seconds. 24 thermobaric warheads, each containing approximately 8 kilograms of fuel-air explosive mixture, initiated in sequence. The launcher's armored hull, designed to protect the crew from incoming fire, instead contained and amplified the internal pressure of the chain reaction for a fraction of a second before it failed. The fireball reached an estimated 400 meters in diameter. The thermal bloom saturated the ISR camera sensor at 1,400 meters altitude for 11 full seconds. The blast wave registered at Ukrainian forward positions 9 kilometers from the target. The secondary column of burning thermobaric fuel was visible for 4 minutes and 19 seconds on the ISR thermal feed before the smoke obscured it completely. At 4:22 a.m., 41 seconds from launch to confirmed impact, the TOS-1A Solntsepyok at grid reference UT 4471 was gone. Strike 2 arrived 6 seconds after Strike 1. It flew into a burning crater where 60 tons of weapons system had been. The second operator brought his drone around on a survey pass, capturing the aftermath on video before the thermal bloom overwhelmed the camera. The footage was transmitted in real time to the Achilles command post. Atlas watched the fireball on his monitor. He keyed his radio. One word: Strikar. Completed. The ISR drone continued circling for 22 minutes. No Russian quick reaction force moved down the forest road toward position 3. No vehicles. The logging track remained empty. The fire burned without interference. At 4:52 a.m., Atlas filed the formal after-action report. 4 drones deployed. 2 expended as decoys on the western approach. 2 as attack aircraft on the eastern approach. Total drone hardware cost, approximately $1,600. Combined operational cost, including ISR flight time across 11 days, operator hours, relay infrastructure, and mission logistics, estimated $5,800 to $6,000. Value of target destroyed, $8.1 million in acquisition cost. Crew, approximately $340,000 in unexpended thermobaric rockets remaining in the launcher's magazine at time of strike. Cost exchange ratio, April 7th, Kreminna strike, approximately 1,350 to 1. But the exchange ratio is not the most important number from that morning. In the 7 days before April 7th, the 73 Ukrainian infantry killed by the Solntsepyok represented the highest single-source casualty rate on the entire Kreminna front. More than artillery, more than drone strikes, more than any other identified system in the sector. The launcher had killed soldiers. It had also changed Ukrainian behavior entirely. Units that would normally conduct night advances had stopped moving after dark. Medical evacuation routes had shifted 2 kilometers north, adding critical response time to any casualty. Forward observation posts that had been manned continuously since January were now rotated on irregular schedules to avoid predictable exposure. A thermobaric weapon destroys positions. It also rewrites how everyone nearby thinks about movement. What's most surprising about the Kreminna operation isn't the 41-second strike. It's what those 11 days of surveillance built, and what the $6,000 operation returned. In the 48 hours following the April 7th strike, the 92nd Brigade's forward elements advanced 340 meters along the Kreminna tree line. Ground they had been unable to take for 9 days while the Solntsepyok was active. 3 Ukrainian observation posts were re-established in that advance. A medical evacuation route was reopened through the area. Suppression effects that had altered brigade-level behavior for over a week evaporated within 12 hours of the launcher's destruction. The physical kill was the visible outcome. The restoration of maneuver was the strategic outcome. Here's a question worth sitting with. If a $1,600 drone configuration can neutralize an $8 million weapons system and restore freedom of movement to an entire brigade sector, what does that say about the future value of large, expensive, conventional military platforms? Leave your actual answer in the comments. We read all of them. Here's the take that will probably get us pushback. The TOS-1A should never have been deployed forward into the Kreminna sector in the first place. Russian operational planners sent it in because their conventional fire support chain, artillery coordination, counter-battery response, aerial fire support, had degraded to the point where they needed a close-range area denial weapon to achieve suppression effects that should have been handled by tube artillery 3 years ago. That's not bold operational thinking. That is covering for a broken system with something louder and more terrifying. The Achilles Battalion's operators on April 7th proved exactly what that choice costs, and they proved it for under $6,000. The relay tower presented one final problem during the April 7th operation itself. At 4:14 a.m., 4 minutes after the RF blackout maneuver, 4 minutes before planned launch, the tower's onboard power supply registered an overload fault. The portable generator running it, a Honda EU22i commercial unit, was operating in -4-degree temperatures on a battery already stressed by 11 days of intermittent field use. Its output was dropping below the minimum threshold for stable transmission. If the tower failed during the attack drone's approach, the operators would lose live video feed. The drones could still fly on GPS waypoints. They could still impact a target, but without real-time video from the attack drone's cameras, Atlas and his second operator would have no ability to adjust the final approach angle, confirm the TOS-1A was still in position, or assess the hit in real time. Atlas's second operator, call sign Voron, bypassed the tower's automatic load balancing circuit and manually redistributed the power draw between the transmission arrays. He did it with a headlamp strapped to his forehead, wearing winter gloves that made the flathead screwdriver difficult to control in under 40 seconds. The tower held. 4 minutes later, they launched. There is something in the Achilles Battalion's execution of this operation that no exchange ratio captures. It is the accumulation of individual decisions, each one capable of ending the mission if it went wrong, each one solved by a specific person making a specific call under pressure. The 11 days of ISR battery management and shift rotation. The RF blackout technique developed through analysis of 2 previous jamming failures. The 4-drone stack configuration built from months of theoretical discussion that had never been tested at this range. Voron's generator fix at 4:14 a.m. in the dark. Each one a small bridge across a gap that could have swallowed the entire operation. None of these solutions came from a training manual that existed before February 2022. The strike created an immediate operational problem that Atlas had not fully anticipated. The ISR footage from the 22 minutes of post-strike observation captured a detail that changed the aftermath picture. The TOS-1A's crew commander, identified over 11 days of observation by his assigned Tiger Light utility vehicle, which carried a specific antenna configuration that had become a reliable signature in the thermal feeds, was not at position 3 when the launcher was destroyed. His vehicle was gone. He had departed before the attack window opened, for reasons that the Achilles Battalion never determined with certainty. The crew commander was alive. He knew his launcher was gone, and within 72 hours, Russian ELINT units in the Kreminna sector had shifted their monitoring protocols. The relay tower RF blackout technique, 60 seconds of deliberate silence before launch, was now a detectable pattern. Once the strike had succeeded, and the pattern was identified retroactively in Russian signals logs, it could be recognized the next time. A 60-second power interruption on a known relay frequency, immediately followed by a drone strike event, creates a technical signature. Once, Coincidence? Twice. Exploitable intelligence. Atlas's team adapted within the week. The next operation in the Kreminna sector used a different timing profile, a different pre-launch behavioral sequence, and a different frequency allocation structure for the relay. The fundamental technique was not retired. It was modified substantially enough that it took Russian signals analysis another 3 weeks to develop a new detection model for the updated pattern. This is the actual tempo of electronic warfare adaptation in the Kreminna conflict. Not months, weeks, days in some cases. Each successful technique reveals itself to the other side through its own success. Each adaptation closes one window and opens a new one. Neither side holds a technical advantage for long. The competition is about who adapts faster. Looking at this operation in its full context, Ukraine's drone units can clearly destroy high-value individual targets. The April 7th strike proved it conclusively, cheaply, and with a tactical patience that cuts against any narrative about irregular forces improvising under pressure. These are engineered operations. The harder question is what it means that this capability now exists at battalion level, built and refined by units that have been doing this for 2 years without major equipment programs, without billion-dollar procurement contracts, without doctrine that existed when this war began. What the Kreminna operation shows is that a decentralized, low-cost precision strike capability now exists that no professional military's planning documents accounted for when the first FPV drones were modified in Ukrainian garages in 2022. That capability is being observed, analyzed, and replicated by defense establishments on every inhabited continent. The TOS-1A at UT 4471 was $8 million. The system that destroyed it costs less than a serviceable used car. That gap is not going to close. There's a second chapter to this operation that we had to cut from this video for length, specifically what happened to the surviving crew commander after April 7th, and how the Achilles Battalion tracked and engaged the replacement TOS-1A that Russian logistics moved into the Kreminna sector 14 days later. Comment part 2 below if you want that story told. If the response is there, we'll break it. The Achilles UAV Battalion continued operating in the Kreminna sector through May and June of 2024. Battalion records, partially declassified and released to Ukrainian defense media in August 2024, document 14 confirmed armored vehicle eliminations, 3 artillery system destructions, and 2 command vehicle strikes in the 60 days following the April 7th operation. The unit suffered 0 combat aircraft losses to direct enemy fire in that period, though 3 drones were lost to jamming-induced signal failure. The relay tower RF blackout protocol was formalized into a written operational procedure in late April 2024 and shared with 4 other Ukrainian UAV battalions operating in the Kharkiv and Luhansk regions. By May 15th, at least 3 units had employed a variant of the technique in active strike operations. The modification Atlas's team had developed in response to Russian pattern recognition was already incorporated into those shared versions. Atlas never gave a public interview. His call sign appears in 2 after-action documents that have been partially cleared for release by Ukrainian Military Security Review. In those reports, in the section marked Commander's Comments, he wrote one sentence about the April 7th operation. We waited 11 days to take 41 seconds. The TOS-1A Solntsepyok at grid UT 4471 was the highest value single target the Achilles Battalion had destroyed through the first half of 2024. A cost-exchange ratio of 1,350 to 1 is not unique to this operation. It has become increasingly representative, a pattern, not an outlier. And the weapon that produced that ratio, the modified FPV kamikaze drone, is itself now the subject of dedicated countermeasure investment by every major military force monitoring the conflict. Russia has deployed generation-specific anti-FPV electronic warfare systems along the front. China's People's Liberation Army has studied Ukrainian FPV doctrine with documented seriousness since late 2023. The United States Army opened procurement discussions in early 2024 for counter-UAS systems specifically modeled on Kreminna-type engagement scenarios. The 41 seconds on April 7th are already shaping force structure decisions on 3 continents. If you want to follow this war operation by operation, system by system, with the specificity it deserves, subscribe. We document what's happening on this front line because these 41 seconds matter far beyond the Kreminna tree line. Like this video if the numbers tell the story for you. And if you want to go deeper on the full electronic warfare picture behind the relay tower technique, what Russia detected, what they missed, and why it mattered, that is the next video. It's already in production.